It's the 80s. Metroid for the NES is getting made. Marvel of game design. Nintendo makes the bold choice, lets players move whatever direction they want, screen scrolls that way. And in that design process, somebody says, hey, boss fights would be pretty cool. Final boss? No problem. Brain in a jar. Another boss? Make him some weird fat lizard thing. We need one more. And so they make this specimen of design, this beautiful beast, this gnarled little purple mess of pixels. Ridley is born. Ridley is such a standout villain in a series where he's not even the main antagonist of any of its entries. He's got this simple yet intimidating design, this haunting but equally intense battle theme. He's consistently one of the more challenging and enjoyable bosses within the franchise. Basically, I like Ridley a lot, like a lot, and that's why I just want to talk about him. His name is Ridley, like Ridley Scott. He's the aliens guy, and he looks like a Xenome, yada yada yada, that you've heard about pop culture before, and that's not really anything I think is important. But what's Ridley in the context of Metroid itself? That's the thing, we don't know. Despite being around since the literal beginning, we have no consistent knowledge of just what he is. The original Metroid manual and the Virtual Console retranslation of that same manual claims that Ridley is an indigenous creature of Zebes, which is interesting because we still don't know what his species is, and we haven't seen any other of said species. But whatever, he came from Zebes and left, I guess, and at some point he joined the Space Pirates. Or did he? So, also unclear is what exactly is his relationship with the Space Pirates. He's clearly acting as their leader in the manga before Mother Brain appears and becomes the new leader. So, did he join an existing organization, rise to the ranks, or was he perhaps a founder of the organization? We don't know. All we know is around the year 2000, Galactic Federation formed, then the Space Pirates formed because they didn't like them. We don't know how old Ridley is, or what the state of the Space Pirates was when he became involved, so we'll just say he's the leader, and eventually he shares being the leader, or is at least pretty important. So Ridley and the Space Pirates, they decide to attack this mining colony called K2L. That's where 3-year-old Samus and her mom and dad live. The colony's mining a fluorotite, which is basically fuel. Space Pirates want in on that, and so Ridley and the boys roll up and start killing. And I'm talking like full-on massacre killing, as in Ridley actively tells them, kill first, then get the fuel. Samus meets up with Ridley, and being a child, she tries to befriend him and fight through the fear. He then proceeds to kill her mother. Meanwhile, Samus's father is on one of the pirate ships and makes the decision to blow up all the fluorotite on the ship. Unfortunately, that kills him as well, then causes the flaming wreckage of the ship to fall down to the planet, leading to easily one of the funniest Ridley moments of all time.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
So fast forward, Samus grows up, does the whole military thing, and eventually Ridley and the Space Pirates invade Zebes, which is pretty much defenseless without Samus there. Worth noting is that during this invasion, the Space Pirates have at their disposal a, and I quote, micro black hole, which they should definitely be using more often in the series, but whatever. Fast forward a bit more, and Mother Brain is working with, or maybe mind-controlling, the Space Pirate grunts, and is working alongside Ridley as leader now. Samus and Ridley have a very one-sided fight, as Samus is practically dying on the floor from PTSD. And you also get a glimpse into one of Ridley's powers that they don't usually talk about. How did Ridley heal the whole burning and fuel and wreckage thing? Easy, he ate the bodies of all the dead humans around. He even takes a minute to be a dick about it to Samus. Eventually, after some hijinks and friendship, Samus is saved and getting away with some of the Chozo prisoners and her police/military buddies. All the while, Ridley is getting slapped around by Samus's Chozo grandpa for a bit, before the reversal and Ridley proceeds to Kakyoin him. The manga does continue from here and sorta melds into a very quick retelling of the first game at the end of the second volume, but since we're here to focus on Ridley himself, we'll carry on into talking about his appearance in the first game. So when Samus is on Zebes to take out the space pirates, oh, and the Metroids are there too, she ends up running into Ridley and has to fight him. He doesn't say anything, and they fight, and oh, what a fight it is! But worth noting is the difference in depiction of Ridley's defeat in this battle between the three versions we have of it. 1. The NES original. He explodes. 2. Metroid Zero Mission. He explodes and shrieks. 3. The manga. Samus shoots the hell out of him and he bursts into flames and cries in pain as Samus watches, and then she lets out a big battle cry as he's burning to death. But just as he didn't die from burning last time, he won't die from burning and exploding this time, because he'll be back. A lot. But here's where we continue on into Metroid Zero Mission. As in this retelling of events, there's one little extra part after Samus defeats Mother Brain and blows up the space pirate base on Zebes. Samus gets shot down, works her way through some old Chozo ruins, and at the end she finds our first new incarnation of Ridley. Mecha Ridley, an entirely robotic version of Ridley, who was supposedly created by his own namesake and isn't finished yet when Samus encounters him. Why did Ridley make him? Who knows? I guess he just thought a strong robot would be helpful to have around, and fair enough, space pirates are consistent in their love for just making shit for the sake of it being good at fighting. But anyway, Samus manages to beat Mecha Ridley, and that's the last time we see him as the base explodes and Samus leaves. Presumably, Mecha Ridley is entirely destroyed as a result. Or is he? So also presumably, with this new basis on knowledge for mecha designs of a Ridley-based nature, we end up with the remaining space pirates regrouping and dragging Ridley to the frigate Orpheon, and he's been given a whole new variety of mechanical enhancements, makes him stronger, he can drop bombs now, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, Samus finds him, and he's just hanging around, and he runs off down to Talon 4. The whole game goes by, see him fly overhead in Fendrana Drifts, and that's about it. Eventually, Samus gets all the Chozo artifacts together, is ready to head in and fight Metroid Prime, then timely as always, Meta Ridley appears and decides to fight her. He probably could have gotten one over on her, but sadly his chest area is not as well armored as the rest of him, and unfortunately the chest is where organs are housed. Ridley has been shot a staggering number of times, wings are almost completely gone. At the last minute, the Chozo Temple's defense system kicks in, collectively lasers him in the chest, and he falls off a cliff and explodes. But it must be noted that he has exploded before, and survived. We didn't see the life leave his body, we just saw him fall. So he's still alive, he just needs a break. So much so that he's not in the next two games. Prime Hunters and Prime 2, nowhere to be seen. Rehabilitation can be kind of slow like that. An important thing that I kind of skipped over just now is that in the Prime series of games, there's this pretty important thing. It's a substance so powerful that its presence can literally ruin planets and infect ecosystems to irreparable extents. It's called Phazon. And while it doesn't have anything to do with Ridley prior to Prime 3, it's very important to note that in Prime 1 and 2, you get a look into the deep and nuanced R&D process of the space pirates upon discovering Phazon. That's not important right now, because the space pirates are attacking Norian, and fresh off of his 2-game stint spent presumably eating flesh to heal and getting re-equipped with all his mech stuff, Ridley's there too. Spends a while terrorizing Samus on a bunch of tubes, till finally Samus fixes one of the facility's generators, and Ridley makes the very bold move to tackle Samus down a generator shaft. Now, Ridley, being both a genius and a bloodthirsty monster, makes an even more impressive follow-up decision. He proceeds to fight her as they both fall down the shaft, a scenario in which Samus is at the complete disadvantage, as Ridley is shown to be easily capable of both flying up and down the shaft as well as just reaching out and grabbing the edges around him and totally stopping his fall. How could Samus get out? I mean, I guess theoretically she could wall jump or maybe shine spark her way back out, but this is Prime Samus, who's not exactly known for her vertical mobility. Regardless, I guess Ridley just wants to make sure, so he stays and fights her. After a while spent lasering, slapping, and falling, Samus eventually decides to shoot Ridley in the throat a few times, and Rundus gives her a ride out. Unlike previous appearances, I think it's pretty reasonable for Ridley to get out of this one. He isn't unconscious or anything, his wings are fine by the time Samus leaves, so he probably just waits a minute and then leaves after her. Anyway, Ridley heads home to the pirate homeworld, hurt but not dead, and what do the pirates say? And thus, Omega Ridley is born. Now with Phazon enhancements, he heads over to the local Leviathan Seed and waits for Samus to show up. She promptly shows up and shoots him until he explodes into a big puff of smoke. Unlike last time, this one seems pretty definitive. Much like the other Leviathan Seed bosses, he does indeed burst into Phazon smoke and Samus absorbs it. So basically we're going off him exploding into smoke, and hey, we gave him a pass for the same thing in the original game and Zero Mission, so we're just gonna say he ran away really quick. And Samus was busy focusing on her Phazon tummy ache. It is worth noting that in the original Metroid 2, Ridley was not present, but in the 3DS remake, he shows up at the very end of the game to be the new final boss. And you notice that he has a design. So this is Proteus Ridley. He's half regenerated his organic body and half still relies on his mech enhancements. He's the Arnold Palmer of Ridley's, and much like an Arnold Palmer, I'd really rather just have one of the two halves. Despite getting a few good hits in during the fight, he is shockingly not successful, and Samus shoots him until he falls over. Lucky for him, Samus is fresh off her 99.9% Metroid genocide, and takes the remaining 0.01% with her, so he's not gonna get Metroid sucked in the meantime. Even more lucky, he wakes up and flies away before one of the X-Parasites can grab him. Why was he here? Pretty much just to bridge the lore so that he could be organic again for Super Metroid. I guess they thought if they shoehorned in a weird in-between Ridley that it would make sense, and I mean, yeah, sure. Whatever, it works.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
So that was a fucking lie.
Now Ridley's back to regular old organic Ridley, which, if the logs in Prime 1 are anything to go off of, would mean that he's much weaker now. But I digress. He's back, and he wipes out a facility that Samus just dropped off the baby Metroid at. They have a fight, and Samus loses, because I guess she just took off her power-ups in the few hours between Samus returns and now he's on Zebes, the baby Metroid is in Space Pirate clutches. Bad day. Cue Samus having the whole Super Metroid adventure. Kraid's back, we're not here to get into him, but he also exploded last time we saw him, but whatever. She fights a ghost, a giant bug, the greatest boss of all time, and finally Ridley. So this is a very important Ridley fight. The fight itself is business as usual, and upon shooting him enough, Ridley yet again explodes. But not only does he explodes into pieces. And we've forgiven much more prior to this, and given Ridley credit to have survived similar depictions of his death, but this time is a bit different. Hard cut to a while later, and Samus has killed Mother Brain, and Zebes is about to explode. Samus gets out in the nick of time, and everything is fine for once. So even if Ridley was still alive after the fight, which is not unlikely, there's a very strong chance that he wasn't able to escape anywhere safe before Zebes exploded. Consider that he's in this big fuck-off underground base. His wings and body in general are just horribly damaged, so moving is definitely not on the agenda. There's no one around to help him, or even any bodies really to eat. Even if these problems weren't there, he's only got so long before Samus kills Mother Brain and then everything explodes. Basically, for once, I can't really hand-wave this away, since a planetary explosion really does cover all possible avenues for escaping death. So, as of the end of Super Metroid, Ridley is officially dead. We're here. We made it. The game. The funny. The baby. Luckily, we're here to talk about Ridley and not the rest of it. So anyway, because scientists in the Metroid universe are a bunch of amoral psychopaths, they offer Samus a free suit cleaning after Super Metroid is done, and they scrape Metroid, Mother Brain, and Ridley DNA off the suit to make it into new versions of all the above. So now we have Baby Ridley, or as the scientists called him, Little Birdie. He looks like this, and he eats and screams, and that's about it. Normal baby stuff. Scientists kept him as a pet, he got out, he ate, he yelled, and eventually grows and leaves behind his body as a shell. Normal baby stuff. So later you meet Ridley again, now known as the Mystery Creature. There's really not much to say. He's a big lizard and he attacks Samus and the gang. You fight him and he runs away. He ain't Ridley yet, but he kills some people, so you know he's in there. Finally, you actually get to fully formed Ridley, and he's been hitting the gym since he finished evolving. He proceeds to blast Samus with his PTSD beam, and she pees all over herself in fear. Dumb people might say this reaction makes sense for her, since she thought he was dead, and now he's back, and that's unexpected and scary. But also, she's canonically beaten him 5 times prior to this, and in multiple of those instances, he was in an enhanced form. But whatever, it's happening now anyway, because Other M is just a thinly veiled character assassination of Samus. Anyway, Ridley grabs Samus, whose suit goes away for a minute for some reason, and then Ridley commits a hate crime, and that pisses Samus off so much that she fights him. It's a fight in Other M, so it looks neat, but feels terrible. I guess to its credit, the effect of Ridley showing battle damage as the fight goes on is a good detail, and he has his command grab from his boss fight in Brawl, so that's also alright. Eventually he falls over and runs away while Samus isn't looking, only to get lunched on by the Queen Metroid, because there's one of those running around too, and all we have left is a Ridley skin suit. For the second time, there's not really a way to play this off as not being a death. We literally find his empty husk of a corpse, and he's surrounded by blood. So once again, our main man is very much dead. But hey, now Other M is done, and we can get the yucky taste out of our mouth with a good game like Metroid Fusion. X-Parasites are bad. Fuck you! And they can mimic stuff. Got that? Cool. Here's Ridley in a freezer. Galactic Federation cleaned out the ship, and because, as you'll recall, we're dealing with a group of psychopaths, they grabbed their fresh-made Ridley statue and wanted to keep it from going bad, so they put it here on the Biologic Space Lab. Worth noting is that in transit, I guess Ridley's jaw got tired. Anyway, you walk past the freezer man, he disintegrates after a parasite leaves his body, and a little while later, oh hey, what do you know, they mimic him. They even do the husk part, so big ups to the parasites for copying him just as he left off. He has an interesting scream. Flies around, it's his usual MO. Samus beats him, absorbs the parasite, and goes on her merry way. I would hardly call this Ridley properly living again, but if I can handwave death, then I can handwave life, so it counts, and he officially comes back for a 3rd time, only to die mere moments later. And just to make sure he's as gone as possible, the base ends up crashing into SR-388 and exploding. So unless they scrape parasite clone flakes off of Samus after fusion, then he doesn't really have another avenue of coming back, and is completely 100% dead. So, while one of my main focuses in talking about this was just to go through Ridley's strange journey through life and death, and life and death again, and roboticism, and substance abuse, I also wanted to just talk about Ridley and his appearances in everything beyond the canon material. There's a weird game guide / manga that came out in 1986 alongside Metroid on the NES called Victory Techniques for Metroid, which is a very fun read and features Ridley on exactly 4 pages, 3 of which are just his boss fight. Worth noting is that they include a coward strategy for how to defeat him from underneath the platform. In Metroid Zeb's Invasion Order, which is a choose-your-own-adventure type of book, also from 1986, there's an encounter with Ridley, and a pretty cool picture of him. 1987's Famicom Ryu features 2 Metroid-related chapters, as the titular character Famicom Ryu enters the world of Metroid for the NES and almost gets vored by Ridley. He shows up in a few minor instances in the 1994 Super Metroid 4-panel comedy manga, and he is just adorable. Also in 1994 was a short series of Super Metroid comics featured in Nintendo Power. Ridley appears in the beginning, much like in the game, just with a bit of banter, and when he shows up later near the end as Samus is storming Torian, he just bails on the whole situation and leaves. In 2002, there were a few comics in Nintendo Power to coincide with Metroid Prime. Ridley shows up for his boss fight, and then gets flamethrowered to death. From 2002 to 2005, the series Samus and Joey saw Samus and her shonen-esque protagonist new friend Joey go on stupid space adventures that culminate in a series of battles with the Henchmen of Greed, a member of Ridley's species seeking revenge against Samus for destroying their race. Greed looks exactly like Ridley and is also a space pirate, and beyond that I don't know anything about him because he's just a guy who gets sucked into a black hole and dies at the end. There's no fight or anything, he doesn't really show up much prior to that, so who knows. Ridley shows up as a judge in the Captain N comics, and Mother Brain makes some very crass comments about his race. And he seemingly appears in the 201st episode of Captain N entitled Game Boy, but only briefly, and I'll be honest, I only skimmed watching the episode, so I don't know if he's identified as Ridley at any point, and he looks nothing like Ridley in any depiction, but whatever. They claim that he's Ridley on one of the design documents, apparently. He's a boss in the Metroid minigame in Nintendo Land, he's a pet in Miitomo, stage hazard in Dead or Alive Dimensions, makes several appearances in the Smash Bros. Franchise, ranging from boss to background element to character, makes the occasional appearance in commercials for Metroid games, and of course, makes easily his most iconic appearance in Metroid Pinball, as a stage hazard on the Artifact Temple stage. As you can see, Ridley has had some amazing adventures, both canon and non-canon. Consider that if you want to be really unforgiving about hand-waving his defeats, then he could have theoretically died 6 times. He can breathe fire and lasers, he can fly, he can drop bombs, he can stab people with his tail, he can cut them with his claws, he can survive in space, breathe just fine there, even fly around, none of which should be possible since there's no air, but he does it anyway. He really is just a space dragon when you boil him down. But at the same time, he's this supposed super genius that can command legions of space pirates in concentrated attacks, and who built a mechanized recreation of himself. He has this sinister charisma to him when he talks, but at the same time, you get him in a fight, and he's just screaming at you like a monster. What does he want? It's not really clear. He just seems to enjoy being a dick, and that's why he's part of the space pirates, so that he can kill, steal, and ruin people's lives. But then, you add Samus to the mix, and he explodes beyond that and reveals he's this decades-long grudge-holding, vindictive, crazy person. Like, fair enough. You didn't manage to get her as a kid, and her dad blew up the stuff you stole and burned you alive. You'd be mad. A while later, you get the chance to fight her as you're desecrating her home with your boys, and she blows you the fuck out and leaves you for dead. Even worse, a few hours later, you hear that she broke into your house and killed your pet robot. Understandably, you're so mad that you have your boys mechanically enhance you. You're stronger than ever. You run into her, and when you finally go for it and attack her, she proceeds to body you so bad that statues push you off a cliff and you explode. About there is where a lot of people would probably stop, but no, he just takes a break, stews for a while, comes back with no new strategy other than to tackle her down an energy shaft. Gravity will kill her isn't a good enough thought, so he stays to help gravity get the job done and gets beaten again for all his trouble. He's so mad he takes a radiation dip and waits for her to home invade him again, and when she does, she just beats him again! At this point, Ridley starts to regenerate back to normal, so he could just leave. What's stopping him? He's willing to dip out at the most important moments, apparently. But no, he hears, oh hey, the hunter just wiped out an entire species, and he's so eager to get in there and fight her that he doesn't even get fully undressed before he leaves. And he's so mad about losing that time that he does ditch the baggage and immediately fly after her just so he can take her baby away. And he has the prime chance to kill her as he's leaving. But no, he just leaves, waits for her to get stronger, gets shot a bunch, and then dies in an explosion for his troubles. Assuming his clone and mimic have no memories, this is where his story ends in terms of him pursuing his grudge against her. Once you know the depth of how far he's willing to go so he can kill her, you consider moments like when he has her totally PTSD'd out of her mind in the manga, or when they initially meet in Prime 1, or the beginning of Super Metroid. He just doesn't kill her when he has the chance. And sure, there's arguments to be made about how he has other objectives going on in these scenarios, but if anything, I just think it shows how irrational his behavior becomes when Samus is involved. Like, sure, in both Prime 1 and Super Metroid he has to get out of there before the ship explodes, but in both scenarios, he's well aware that Samus follows them, and he doesn't attack her. He waits. Super Metroid, he waits just to give her the false hope that she can get the baby Metroid back. Prime 1, he waits for her to gather all the artifacts and go to the ruins to open it, and then he attacks and destroys the ruins. back to the manga, he mocks Samus, saying how he probably ate her mom's corpse, then tries to convince one of the Chozo to kill her themselves, even follows up and says they should just kill the Chozo too. The point I'm trying to illustrate is that he has this noticeable change in behavior when it comes to Samus, where he does indeed want her to die, but that she also has to suffer somehow first. Almost like the act of killing her isn't revenge enough for him at this point. And with each defeat and loss of more pirates and resources, he moves further beyond being rational. Thus, moments like fighting her in the energy shaft, or attacking when she's done literally committing genocide, that seem like terrible ideas to you or me, are thoughts that he acts on without hesitation. I joked about it earlier, but Ridley really does embody this strange cross-section of super genius and literal monster. We know he's rational, intelligent, articulate, but this one human among probably thousands that he's killed manages to slip out of his grasp, and eventually even beat him, and he just can't take it. He's this bizarre role reversal of Captain Ahab in The White Whale. He just can't stop himself, and he can seemingly think things through up until the moment when he actually has his chance to kill her. He has to check that she's suffered in some way recently, and if the answer comes back yes, he goes for it, and every time it's to his detriment. I just simply find it so fascinating how Ridley's characterized in this way. How he can represent this mix of cunning and brutality, but how Samus's mere presence can almost completely push him to this brutality side all on its own. I'm not implying he's the only villain to have something like this, or even that he's the best example of it, but rather that this character, who on the surface can be written off as this almost cartoonish evil dragon monster, has this strange depth to his behavior throughout a series where he isn't even that important. So, what was my point in making all this? I'm not breaking new ground and simply saying I like Ridley. Plenty of people like Ridley already. I'll admit a big part of it for me is simply talking about Ridley's history throughout the series. I just think it's so fun and weird to think about how through the slow and steady patchwork of 35 years worth of Metroid games and material, he's been given these loose connections between appearances just so he can keep being in the series. And over time, despite his actually quite limited screen time throughout all the things he does appear in, he still leaves this distinct impression that is slowly formed of this character that I think people boil down too often into simple ideas like Samus hates Ridley because he killed her parents, or Ridley hates Samus for foiling his plans. And while not technically wrong, there's just more to it. Feel free to disagree with me and tell me I was wrong or something, didn't consider something. I have a strange love for this weird purple dragon monster, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've just deluded myself into seeing all this depth and no one else does. Regardless, thanks for watching.